The church was supposed to be peaceful that morning. It was my baby Iris's christening day, and everything had been perfect until my sister Veronica stood up and started clapping right in the middle of the ceremony. The sound echoed off the stone walls like gunshots. "Bravo, Hazel! Really, bravo!" Her voice dripped with fake sweetness that made my stomach turn. At least this child won't grow up fatherless like the last one. The laughter started immediately. My Aunt Patricia covered her mouth, but her shoulders shook. My cousin Bethany had her phone out, recording everything. Even the church elders were chuckling. These people had known me since I was baptized in this very church 32 years ago, and now they were laughing at my pain. My father Warren stood up from his front row seat, his tall frame commanding attention like always. He was wearing his expensive navy suit, the one he wore to close big deals at his car dealerships. His voice boomed with the authority of a man who'd never been questioned in his life. Some women never learn from their mistakes. They just keep making the same bad choices over and over again. More laughter. My mother Daphne sat frozen beside him, her hands clutched so tight around her hymnal that her knuckles were white. She wouldn't look at me. My brother Garrett and his wife exchanged uncomfortable glances from their pew, but neither spoke up. I stood at the altar holding 6-month-old Iris, my white dress suddenly feeling like a target painted on my back. Pastor Coleman had stopped mid-blessing, his kind face creased with concern. The baptismal water still dripped from his fingers. That's when I heard the small voice that changed everything. "Grandpa, should I tell them what you made me promise to keep secret?" My 7-year-old son Colby was standing on the pew so everyone could see him. He was trembling in his little navy suit, the one we'd bought specially for today. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the proum. Church like thunder. The laughter died instantly. You could have heard a pin drop. Warren's face went from smug satisfaction to pure panic in less than a second. "Colby, sit down right now. But you told me lying is a sin. You said keeping bad secrets makes God sad." Colby's chin lifted slightly, finding courage somewhere deep inside. "You said if I told Mommy about the lady who visits your office, you'd stop coming to my baseball games. But I don't think God wants me to lie anymore." Every head in that church turned from my shaking son to my father. Warren Fitzgerald, pillar of the community, church board member for 15 years, the man who'd built an empire of car dealerships across 3 counties, looked like he'd been shot. "My name is Hazel Fitzgerald Mills, and I'm a 32-year-old single mother of 2. Yes, 2 children with different fathers. Yes, both men left. Those were supposed to be my shameful secrets, my failures as a woman and a mother. But standing in that church, watching my 7-year-old son face down the most powerful man in our family, I realized the real secrets in our family were much darker than anyone imagined. That morning had started with such promise. I'd been awake since 4 a.m., not from anxiety but from excitement. Baby Iris had actually slept through the night for the first time, and I took it as a sign that this day would be special. I stood in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, where I'd been staying since Ramon left, carefully pressing the white sundress I'd bought specifically for the christening. "Mom, why do we have to get up so early?" Colby had wandered in, rubbing his eyes, his dinosaur pajamas wrinkled from sleep. "Because your sister's christening is at 10, and we need to make sure everything's perfect." I'd pulled him onto my lap, breathing in his little boy's smell of shampoo and dreams. "You're going to be the best big brother today, aren't you? Do I have to hold her again? She always grabs my hair. Just during the pictures, baby. Then you can sit with Grandma Daphne." He'd gone quiet at that, the way he'd been doing lately whenever I mentioned family. "Is Grandpa Warren coming?" "Of course he island. Why wouldn't he?" Colby had shrugged, sliding off my lap. "He just seems mad at you a lot. Kids notice everything." I should have paid more attention to that observation, but I was too focused on making everything perfect. This christening was supposed to be my redemption story. Yes, I was a single mother again. Yes, Iris's father Ramon had vanished the moment I'd shown him the positive pregnancy test 6 months ago, but I was handling it with grace this time. I had a good job at the marketing firm. I'd just gotten a promotion, and I was providing stability for my children without anyone's help. The drive to church had been peaceful. I'd strapped both kids into my Honda, the one reliable thing in my life, and we'd sung along to Disney songs all the way there. The September morning was crisp and bright, the kind of day that makes you believe in fresh starts. The church parking lot was already filling up when we arrived. "Street, Matthew's Episcopal Church had been my family's spiritual home for 3 generations. The red brick building with its white steeple had witnessed every major moment of my life. My baptism, first communion, confirmation, my wedding to Derek. Derek and I had stood at that very altar 7 years ago, promising forever while I was 8 months pregnant with Colby. Forever lasted exactly 13 months. Hazel, there you are. My mother Daphne had rushed over the moment we walked in, immediately taking Iris from my arms. Oh, look at this precious angel in her christening gown. She looks just like you did at her age. Mom was trying so hard to make this normal, to pretend the circumstances weren't what they were. She'd been doing that dance for months now, caught between supporting me and managing my father's disappointment. At 55, she was still beautiful in that refined way that came from good genes and a lifetime of proper moisturizing. But lately I'd noticed new lines around her eyes, a tightness in her smile. "Where's Dad?" I'd asked, though I already knew he'd make an entrance later. Warren Fitzgerald didn't arrive places, he made appearances. Oh, he had to stop by the dealership, some emergency with a shipment. You know how at Island I did know. There was always some emergency more important than family moments, unless of course those moments could showcase his success. Then he was front and center. My brother Garrett had arrived next with his wife Juniper and their twins. Garrett was the success story, the one who'd done everything right. Medical degree, thriving practice, appropriate marriage to a woman from a good family. He'd hugged me tight, whispering, "You okay?" in my ear. Garrett was the only one who ever really asked. "I'm good. Really good, actually. Colby seems quiet. He's been that way lately. I think the Raymond situation hit him harder than I expected. He'd gotten attached." Garrett had frowned slightly. "Has Dad been around him much?" They went to the dealership together last weekend. Dad's been taking him to baseball practice sometimes. Why? No reason, just wondering. The church had filled quickly. Our family took up the first 3 rows on the left side, the same seats we'd occupied my entire life. The Fitzgeralds had paid for those pews to be restored in 1987, a fact my father mentioned at least once a month. I saw the Hendersons, the Walkers, the Chens, all the familiar faces from decades of Sundays. They smiled at me, but I caught the whispers, the quick glances at my ringless finger, the subtle head shakes. And then Veronica had arrived, fashionably late as always, sweeping in with Mitchell and their 3 perfectly dressed children like they were walking a red carpet. Pastor Coleman had just begun the traditional blessing when everything started to unravel. He'd been speaking about the sacred responsibility of raising children in faith and community, his gentle voice filling the sanctuary with warmth. Iris was peaceful in my arms, her tiny fingers wrapped around my thumb, the antique christening gown that had been in our family for 60 years flowing perfectly over her small body. "Who stands with this child as godparents?" Pastor Coleman asked. That's when Veronica stood up. But instead of walking forward to take her place as Iris's godmother, she remained in her pew and started that slow, deliberate clapping. "Bravo, Hazel. Really, just bravo." Her voice cut through the sacred atmosphere like a knife. She was wearing a crimson dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her blonde hair perfectly styled in waves that caught the stained glass light. "Here we are again, everyone. Another baby, another christening, another father who mysteriously vanished into thin air. Veronica, what are you doing?" My mother's voice was sharp but quiet, the tone she used when we were children misbehaving in public. "I'm celebrating, Mother. Celebrating my sister's incredible ability to pick men who run at the first sign of responsibility. At least, this child won't grow up fatherless like the last one. Oh wait, she will." The congregation stirred uncomfortably. I saw Mrs. Patterson lean over to whisper to her husband. Someone in the back actually chuckled. My face burned hot, but I held Iris tighter and kept my voice steady. "Veronica, this is neither the time nor the place." "When is the time, Hazel? When is the place?" "Because we all tiptoe around you, pretending this is normal. 2 kids, 2 different fathers, both gone. What are the odds?" She turned to address the congregation like she was giving a presentation. "Ladies, take note. This is what happens when you have no standards." Mitchell was smirking beside her, that awful superior look he always wore at family dinners. Their children sat perfectly still, trained like show dogs to never embarrass their parents. Everything about them was curated, controlled, perfect. That's enough. Garrett stood up, but our father's voice boomed over his. Let her speak. Warren had finally arrived, striding down the center aisle like he owned the place, which in a way he did, considering his donations. Someone needs to say what we're all thinking. He positioned himself at the end of our pew, his presence commanding attention. Warren Fitzgerald at 58 was still an imposing figure, 6'2", silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary. He'd built his car dealership empire from nothing, a fact he never let anyone forget. Some women never learn from their mistakes, he announced, his voice carrying that particular tone of disappointment he'd perfected over the years. They keep making the same bad choices, picking the same type of men, then acting surprised when history repeats itself. Dad, please, I managed to say, though my voice cracked slightly. Iris had started to fuss, sensing the tension. What? Someone has to teach you responsibility, Hazel. Do you know what people say about you? About our family? There goes Warren's daughter, pregnant again, no husband in sight. Do you know how that affects my business? My reputation? Your reputation? I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. I'm sorry my life is inconvenient for your image. Image matters, he roared. I didn't build everything we have by ignoring what people think. Perception is reality in business and in life. Your sister understands that. He gestured to Veronica, who stood taller, vindicated. She married properly, maintains her household, raises her children with both parents present. Why is that so difficult for you? Uncle Theodore called out from his pew. Truth hurts, doesn't it? My cousin Bethany had her phone out, recording everything. I'm already imagine the family group chat exploding with this drama. More ammunition for every family gathering for the next decade. You want to know the truth? I started to respond, but Mitchell cut me off. The truth is that Derek was smart to leave when he did. And Ramon? Well, at least he learned from Derek's example. Why stick around for the inevitable drama? The laughter that rippled through the church felt like physical blows. These people had watched me grow up. Mrs. Henderson had taught my Sunday school. Mr. Walker had hired me for my first job at 16. The Chens had brought casseroles when Derek left. Now they were all laughing at my humiliation. Pastor Coleman tried to restore order. Please, this is a house of worship. We're here to celebrate a child's entrance into our faith community. But the damage was spreading like wildfire. Veronica wasn't done. Faith community. What faith? What values is Hazel teaching these children? That fathers are optional? That commitment is negotiable? That's when I noticed Colby had gone completely rigid beside me, his little hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles were white. Colby stood up so suddenly that his hymnal fell to the floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the sanctuary. His small frame was shaking, but his voice rang out clear and strong. Grandpa, should I tell them what you made me promise to keep secret? The words hung in the air like a challenge. Warren's face transformed from smug satisfaction to something I'd never seen before. Pure, undiluted fear. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Colby, sit down this instant, Warren commanded, but his usual authority had cracked. There was something desperate in his tone that made everyone lean forward. But you told me that keeping secrets is lying and lying is a sin? Colby continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. You said God sees everything and he doesn't like when we hide the truth. So why? Did you make me promise not to tell Mommy about Mrs. Sylvia? The name dropped like a bomb. My mother's sharp intake of breath was audible across the church. Warren took a step backward, his face draining of color. The boy doesn't know what he's talking about, Warren said quickly. Too quickly. He's confused, making up stories. I'm not making it up. Colby's voice cracked with emotion. She comes to your office every Tuesday and Thursday when Mrs. Margaret leaves for lunch. She has yellow hair and wears red lipstick, and she drives that red Mercedes. The one you said was a client's car when Grandma asked about it. Daphne stood up slowly, her hymnal falling forgotten to the floor. Warren? The boy is confused, Warren repeated, but sweat was beading on his forehead. Children have wild imaginations. You kissed her, Colby shouted, tears streaming down his face now. I saw you. That day you took me to work because Mom had her job interview. You said I could play games on the computer in the back office, but I came out to ask for juice and I saw you kissing her by the copy machine. You gave her a necklace, a blue one with sparkles. You said it matched her eyes. The church was absolutely silent. Even baby Iris had stopped fussing, as if she understood the gravity of the moment. Veronica had sunk back into her pew, her face pale beneath her perfect makeup. You made me promise not to tell, Colby continued, his little chest heaving with the effort of finally releasing these words. You said if I told anyone, especially Mommy or Grandma, you'd stop taking me to baseball practice. You'd stop coming to my games. You said it would make everyone sad and it would be my fault for breaking the family. I dropped to my knees beside my son, pulling him close while still holding Iris. Oh, baby, no. Nothing is your fault. Nothing. There's more, Mommy? Colby whispered against my shoulder, but his voice still carried in the silent church. About Iris's daddy. About Mr. Ramon. I pulled back to look at his face. What about Ramon? Grandpa knows where he island. He paid him money to leave. I heard the phone call. Warren lunged forward. That's enough. The boy is clearly disturbed, making up fantasies. Hazel, control your son. But Colby stood taller, pulling away from my embrace to face his grandfather directly. You were in your office at home. You thought I was sleeping on the couch, but I was awake. You called Mr. Ramon and said you'd give him $20,000 if he left town and never contacted us again. You said Mommy didn't need another loser dragging her down. That's a lie, Warren roared. But his protest sounded hollow. You said you'd ruin his landscaping business if he didn't take the deal. You said you had connections at the bank who could call in his loans. You said you'd make sure he never got another contract in the county. Mr. Ramon was crying. Grandpa, I could hear him through your phone. He said he loved Mommy and wanted to be there for the baby, but you said love wasn't enough, that Mommy needed someone with real money and status. My legs nearly gave out. Garrett caught my arm, steadying me. Is this true? I asked, though I already knew the answer. It explained so much. Ramon's sudden coldness, the way he'd changed overnight from excited about the baby to completely distant, the text saying he couldn't do this anymore with no explanation. And Derek, too! Colby was on a roll now, the secrets pouring out like water through a broken dam. My real dad, Derek. He didn't want to leave us. Grandpa threatened him. Said he'd use his lawyer friends to make sure Derek lost custody of his other kids from his first marriage if he didn't disappear. Derek wanted to stay, Mommy. He wanted to be my dad, but Grandpa said you deserved better. You're lying! Warren's voice thundered through the church, but it was the rage of a cornered animal. This child is disturbed, making up stories for attention. Hazel, your son needs professional help. He's not lying. Garrett's voice cut through Warren's protests like a blade. My brother stood up, pulling his phone from his pocket. I have proof. Every head in the church swiveled toward Garrett. He held his phone up high, like a prosecutor presenting evidence. I've suspected something was off for months, Dad. Too many coincidences. Too many of Hazel's relationships falling apart at convenient times. So I did something I'm not proud of. He looked at me apologetically. I planted a voice-activated recorder in your home office 3 months ago. I have everything. Warren's face went from red to white to gray in seconds. You had no right. I had every right. Garrett's usual calm demeanor shattered. You're my father, and you've been destroying my sister's life. Play the first recording, Juniper. Garrett's wife connected her phone to the church's speaker system, a benefit of modern upgrades. Warren's voice filled the sanctuary, clear as day. Ramon, I'm going to make this simple. $20,000 cash deposited into your account today, and you disappear. No contact with Hazel, no claims on the baby, nothing. Then Ramon's voice, thick with emotion. I love her, Mr. Fitzgerald. I want to be there for our child. Love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't build futures. You're a landscaper who can barely make rent. My daughter deserves better. Take the money, or I'll make 3 phone calls and your business loans get called in tomorrow. Your choice. Garrett swiped to another recording. This time it was a woman's voice, breathy and flirtatious. Warren, baby, when are you going to tell your wife? I'm tired of being your Tuesday, Thursday secret. Warren's response. Soon, Sylvia, after the holidays. I need to move some assets around first. Daphne won't get a penny more than necessary." My mother made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. She gripped the pew in front of her for support, her wedding ring catching the light from the stained glass windows. "There's more," Garrett announced grimly. "Derek's recording is particularly heartbreaking." He clicked play again. Derek's voice, one I hadn't heard in 6 years, filled the church. "Mr. Fitzgerald, please. I love Hazel. I love Colby. I made mistakes before, but I'm clean now. I'm working. I can be a good father." Warren's response was ice cold. "You're an ex-addict with 2 kids from a previous marriage. You're exactly the kind of trash I've spent my life keeping away from my daughter. Leave town by Monday, or I'll have my lawyer friend Judge Harrison reopen your custody case. We'll find things. We always do. Your ex-wife is already prepared to testify that you're unstable. Do you want to lose all your children, or just walk away from mine?" The sound of Derek crying came through the speakers. "Colby calls me Daddy. How can I just abandon him? You should have thought of that before you got my daughter pregnant out of wedlock. Monday, Derek, or you'll never see any of your children again." Garrett turned off the recording. The silence in the church was deafening. I looked around at faces I'd known my entire life, now twisted with shock and disgust. Mrs. Patterson had her hand over her mouth. Uncle Theodore looked like he might be sick. Even Veronica was crying, her perfect makeup streaming down her cheeks. "There are 17 more recordings," Garrett said quietly, "including one where you discuss hiring someone to plant drugs in Derek's car if he didn't leave, another where you bragged to Sylvia about handling Hazel's latest mistake. Should I continue?" Warren looked around wildly, seeking support, finding none. "I was protecting her. Both of those men were beneath her. She deserves better than some landscaper or recovering addict." "I deserved love," I screamed, surprising myself with the force of my rage. "I deserved partners who wanted to stay. I deserved a father who supported me, instead of sabotaging me." "And what about what I deserve?" Daphne's voice was deadly quiet. She walked toward Warren with slow, measured steps. 40 years of marriage. 40 years of believing I had a faithful husband. 40 years of lies. She pulled off her wedding ring, the 3-carat diamond he'd given her for their anniversary, and held it out to him. Take it, and get out. Daphne, please, we can discuss this at home. Get out!" Her scream echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Get out of this church. Get out of my life! Get out!" Warren grabbed the ring and backed toward the door, looking at each of us in turn. His empire, his reputation, his family, all crumbling in real time. As he reached the door, he turned back one last time. "Everything I did was for this family," he said. "No," I said, finding my voice again. "Everything you did was for Warren Fitzgerald. And now, everyone knows exactly who that island Warren left the church that day and never came back. Not to the church, not to our lives, not even to fight the divorce that followed. Within a week, the entire town knew everything. Garrett had made sure of that by sending the recordings to Warren's business partners, the church board, and even the local newspaper. The man who'd built an empire on reputation watched it crumble in days. Pastor Coleman, God bless him, salvaged what was left of the christening. After Warren's dramatic exit, he'd gathered us all at the altar and spoke about truth and redemption, about how God uses the voices of children to reveal what needs to be seen. He baptized Iris with tears in his own eyes, and when he handed her back to me, he whispered, "Your children are blessed to have you." The 3 months since have been a whirlwind of change. Mom filed for divorce within a week, and Warren didn't contest it. Turns out Sylvia wasn't his first affair, just his current one. Garrett found evidence of at least 3 others over the past decade. Mom got the house, half the business assets, and something more valuable, her freedom. She moved in with me temporarily, but surprised us all with her strength. I'm 55 years old. She told me one morning over coffee, and I'm just now learning who I am without him. She started teaching art classes at the community center, something Warren had forbidden years ago because he thought it was beneath their status. Her watercolor class has a waiting list now. She smiles differently these days, lighter somehow, like she's been carrying rocks in her pockets for 40 years and finally emptied them out. Derek reached out 2 weeks after the christening. His letter was 3 pages long, explaining everything, apologizing for not fighting harder, for letting Warren intimidate him. He'd been clean for 6 years, had partial custody of his other children, and had never stopped thinking about Colby and me. "I don't expect forgiveness," he wrote, "but if there's any chance to know my son again, I'll take it." We met at a coffee shop first, just him and me. He looked good, healthy, older, but in that way that made him seem more solid, more real. We talked for 3 hours. He showed me pictures of his other kids, told me about his job as a supervisor at a construction company, about the therapy he'd been in since leaving us. "I should have fought harder," he said, eyes wet with unshed tears. "I should have called Warren's bluff. He would have destroyed you," I replied, and we both knew it was true. The first meeting between Derek and Colby happened at a park. Colby was nervous, hiding behind my leg at first. But Derek had brought a baseball glove, the same brand Colby loved, and within an hour they were playing catch, Colby's laughter ringing across the playground. "We're taking it slow, supervised visits for now, but Colby comes home from each one glowing." Ramon's situation was more complicated. He'd taken Warren's money out of desperation. His business really was struggling, and Warren's threats weren't empty, but he'd never spent it. It sat in an account, untouched, like blood money he couldn't bring himself to use. He sent it all back to Warren and asked to be part of Iris's life. "We're figuring it out. He comes by twice a week, holds Iris, changes diapers, does all the things he missed during the pregnancy. It's awkward sometimes, but it's real. He's trying, and that's more than I ever thought I'd have." Veronica might be the biggest surprise. My perfect sister with her perfect life fell apart after the christening. She showed up at my door that night, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. "He controlled me too," she finally managed to say. "Different than you, but still control. Every decision, every purchase, every friendship had to be approved. Mitchell was Dad's choice, not mine. The house, the cars, the private schools, all Dad's decisions. I've been living his life, not mine." We stayed up all night talking, really talking for the first time in years. She told me about the therapy she'd started, about the questions she was asking herself about her own marriage. Mitchell, it turned out, was just a younger version of Warren, controlling, image-obsessed, emotionally absent. She's still with him for now, but she's changing, setting boundaries, finding her voice. "You were always the brave one," she told me last week. "Even when Dad was tearing you down, you kept trying to live your own life. I just gave up and became what he wanted." The church community rallied around us in ways I never expected. Mrs. Henderson organized meal deliveries for weeks. The Walkers offered Mom a job at their accounting firm when she mentioned wanting to work again. Even cousin Bethany, who'd filmed the whole disaster, deleted the video and apologized for her part in the cruelty. But the real hero of this story is my 7-year-old son. Colby had carried those secrets for months, wrestling with loyalty to his grandfather versus truth and justice. A grown man had put the weight of adult sins on tiny shoulders, and somehow, this brave little boy found the courage to throw them off. The other night, while I was tucking him into bed, he asked me a question that stopped my heart. "Mom, are you mad that I kept Grandpa's secrets for so long?" I sat on his bed and pulled him close. "Never, baby. You were put in an impossible situation. Grandpa was wrong to ask you to keep those secrets. What you did took more courage than most adults ever show." "I didn't want you to be sad anymore," he said simply. "You cry when you think we're sleeping. I hear you sometimes." That broke me. I held him tighter and promised myself that his childhood wouldn't be about managing adult pain anymore. "You know what? I'm not sad anymore. I'm free. We're all free. Even Grandma? Especially Grandma." Last Sunday, we went back to St. Matthews. The same church where our family had shattered was where we began rebuilding. As we walked in, heads turned, but instead of whispers and judgment, we received smiles and nods of support. Pastor Coleman's sermon was about Joseph and his coat of many colors, about how sometimes the very thing meant to destroy us becomes our salvation. After the service, old Judge Harrison, one of Warren's former golf buddies, stopped me at the door. "Your boy there," he said, nodding at Colby. "He's got something special. Takes real character to stand up like that. You're raising him right." It was validation I didn't know I needed. Life isn't perfect now. I'm still a single mother of two, still struggling with bills sometimes, still figuring out how to co-parent with men who were driven away by my father's manipulation. But there's a lightness now that wasn't there before. The weight of secrets, of shame, of never being good enough for Warren Fitzgerald's standards, it's all gone. Mom and I were doing dishes last night when she said something that stuck with me. You know, I spent 40 years trying to be the perfect wife to a man who was never faithful, raising children to meet standards that were impossible, living a life that looked good from the outside but was rotten at the core. And it took a 7-year-old boy to show me that the truth, however painful, is always better than a beautiful lie. She was right. My father tried to control our lives through manipulation, threats, and money. He removed men he deemed unworthy, orchestrated our failures, and then blamed us for them. He built a kingdom on lies and intimidation, never imagining it could all come crashing down from the honest words of a child. But that's the thing about truth. It doesn't need to be big or loud or powerful. Sometimes it just needs to be spoken, even in a trembling voice, even through tears, even when everything in you wants to keep it hidden. Colby taught us that. My brave, beautiful boy who stood up in church and refused to carry adult secrets anymore. He saved us all that day, not with strength or power or money, but with simple, devastating honesty. Warren's car dealerships are up for sale now. His reputation is destroyed. Sylvia left him when she realized the money would be tied up in divorce proceedings for years. He lives alone in a condo on the other side of town, a king without a kingdom, a man who gained the whole world but lost his family. Sometimes I wonder if he regrets it, if he lies awake at night thinking about that moment in church when his grandson exposed every carefully hidden sin. But then I realize it doesn't matter. His regret doesn't restore the years stolen from Derek and Colby, doesn't give back the moments Ramon missed with Iris, doesn't return 40 years of faithfulness to my mother. What matters is that we're free. Free to make our own choices, our own mistakes, to love who we choose to love without fear of sabotage, free to be imperfect, to be human, to be real. And it all started with a 7-year-old boy who loved his mother more than he feared his grandfather. That's the power of truth. It doesn't always come from the strongest voice or the most powerful person. Sometimes it comes from the smallest, most unexpected places. Sometimes it comes from a child who simply couldn't carry the weight of lies anymore. If you've made it this far in our story, thank you for listening. Thank you for witnessing our journey from shame to freedom, from secrets to truth. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been controlled, manipulated, or forced to carry secrets that weren't yours to keep, know that your voice matters, your truth matters. And sometimes, speaking it, even in a trembling voice, can change everything. Please like this video if it touched your heart. Share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their struggles. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real, raw stories about families, truth, and the courage to break free from toxic cycles. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue sharing these important stories. Remember, you are never too small, too weak, or too insignificant to speak your truth. Sometimes the smallest voices make the biggest difference.